I formally declare open this council meeting of the Colac Otway Shire on the 29th of March 2023. Sorry? I'll speak a bit louder. Okay. I'll start with the opening prayer. Almighty God, we seek your blessing and guidance in our deliberations on behalf of the people of the Colac Otway Shire. Enable this council's decisions to be those that contribute to the welfare and betterment of our community. I'd like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land, their elders past and present, and welcome any descendants here today. I'd like to advise that this council meeting is recorded and live streamed, with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation sections of meetings. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practicable. By participating in open council meetings, individuals consent to the use and disclosure of the information they share at the meeting, including any personal and/or sensitive information. I would like to note that Councillor Max Arnott took the oath of office before the Chief Executive Officer in the Colac Otway Performing Arts and Cultural Centre, Colac, on Wednesday the 1st of March 2023. A copy of their oath will be attached to the minutes of this meeting in accordance with the requirements of Section 30 in brackets 2C of the Local Government Act 2020. Welcome aboard, Max. It's good to have 7 councillors in the room, and look forward to you working with us as you have been as part of the team.
Thank you, Mayor Chris. I'd like to acknowledge the welcome that I've received from all of the staff and executive of Colac Otway Shire and all of the councillors. It's been more than exemplary, and thank them for allowing me to have some preparedness for this meeting.
Thank you. I note that all 7 councillors are present at this meeting. And moving on to question time. Colac Otway Shire Council encourages community input, and integral to this is the opportunity to ask questions at council meetings. A maximum of 30 minutes is allowed for question time at council meetings. Community members wishing to ask questions of council by video conference were requested to register their intention to do so before 5 p.m. on Monday the 27th of March 2023. No requests to do so were received. I've received requests in writing from James Judd, Tim Cobb, Jason Schramm and Marina Lewis. These questions will be read out and a response will be provided by the relevant member of the executive management team. In accordance with sub-rule 56.6.3 of Council's governance rules, a written response will only be provided to questions that have not been read out at the council meeting. Written responses will be available in the minutes of the Colac Otway Shire website once confirmed at the following council meeting. Before I move to the written questions submitted, can I have a show of hands from those in the gallery who might be wanting to ask a question tonight? No, it's not. Staff are saying they haven't seen that, otherwise we would deal with it, but we'll... Yeah, sorry, we'll look into that, but it's not in front of me, so I have to say that.
Yeah. So I'm sorry that we haven't received that. Yeah.
Hang on a minute, the CEO, just stay there.
Just stay there, that's fine. So I'm sorry that we haven't received it and prepared a response. Perhaps if the Mayor is agreeable, we could hear that immediately after these ones, and if we're able to provide a response, we'll do that then, okay? Otherwise, we'll take it on notice and we'll provide you a written response as soon as we can.
Thank you. Yes, we'll deal with that. Councillors and officers welcome and encourage questions from our community at our council meetings. The majority of questions tonight will be read out without omission. In a small number of cases, I'll read the relevant part of the questions, but I'll not repeat unreasonable statements or allegations, nor will they be published in our minutes. I believe that this approach is consistent with what our community should expect of the Mayor and councillors. Questions from Mr James Judd. Question 1. When will Council find money to fix the Colac meeting chamber, in brackets COPAC, in Colac has been in since its construction, when this facility is used 12 months of the year, since A, no soundproofing between the ceiling and the roof above the meeting rooms. When we've had a bad storm, it is impossible to hear over the noise that enters via the roof, with community groups complaining about meeting destroyed due to the noise for long over a decade. A response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. At minimal times, when there is heavy rain, there is some minor inconvenience when using the COPAC meeting rooms. However, there are no plans at this point in time to redevelop the ceiling and or roof of these meeting spaces.
Thank you. Question 1B. Plus increases its allowance it makes to upgrade drainage in the Shire so it is capable of moving water after a big storm, since very little has been done since the last major floods at least a decade ago, and Council continues to reduce its spends on drainage upgrades. Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor. Council is on track to deliver its infrastructure renewal program for the 22-23 financial year. Council expenditure on renewing assets is guided by Council's Stormwater Asset Management Plan and Council's long-term financial plan. Stormwater systems are designed and built to relevant engineering standards, which are subject to review as new information becomes available.
Thank you. Question 2. Did the Colac Otway Shire Council do any investigation into how long it would take for any benefits to the Shire to accrue from users of the Lake Colac Holiday Caravan Park to at least equal the amount this council proposes to make available to the park operators to upgrade facilities at the park? Do not forget this land is not even owned by council or the operators, so whose property would any improvements put on this land be if the lease was terminated? The council financed. Plus, until a government department issues a lease that allows council to charge any fees to the operator, this land remains free of any council rates or charges rendered by council. Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. The Lake Colac Holiday Park is located on Crown land for which Council is the Committee of Management. Council has committed up to $500,000 towards the development of long-term infrastructure at the holiday park, subject to a new tenant matching this investment. Whilst Council has not undertaken a specific study on the return on investment of its financial commitment to the Lake Colac Holiday Park, Great Ocean Road Regional Tourism has undertaken a number of strategic reviews that recognise the importance of visitor accommodation across the region, including holiday parks.
Thank you. Question 3. Has the Colac Otway Shire Council done anything to make certain it will be able to actually obtain funds from landholders or developers on land that is rezoned by Council for other uses? This is urgent in view of the Victorian State Government's introduction of a tax on valuation increases when Council rezones land. Plus, the State has call on funds prior to Council getting anything. As well, you need to make sure how the State will treat land in multiple ownerships that is to be developed at one time as a total lot, when, if revalued as a total lot, it risks having the super increases in valuations tax charged as well. In this case, Council is at risk of obtaining nothing. Plus, Council could also carry the obligations to provide all needed services to and in these developments out of its own funds. Do not forget that any laws passed that allows Council to claim funds when land is rezoned does not remove the authority that the Commonwealth and State claims against the land must receive priority settlement before any other is paid. Response from the General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. Council is currently developing a precinct structure plan for the major residential growth area of Colac, including the preparation of a development contribution plan. When land is rezoned, there will be mandatory requirements for payment of contributions for infrastructure that will be implemented through planning permit conditions as subdivision is approved. Development will not be able to occur in these areas unless contributions are paid to Council as stipulated, regardless of fees and charges applied by other levels of government. A similar principle is also being applied to the two rezonings proposed at Irrawillippi Road and Colac Lavers Hill Road in Eliminite. Council will do all things necessary at the planning stage to ensure Council is appropriately protected from risk associated with funding shortfalls for infrastructure.
Thank you. Question 4. Is the Blue Water Complex in Colac still running at a cost that requires about 5% of rate income to cover the operating deficit as was claimed when the 2022-2023 budget was set? If not, has it gone up or reduced? Response from the General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor, Council's adopted budget 22-23 indicates a net cost for operating Blue Water Leisure Centre in the order of $680,000, which is subsidised by general rates, which are in the order of $30 million. Our expenditure is generally on track, however, our revenue is currently down.
Thank you. Question 5. When setting the Council's 2023-2024 rate notices, will the Colac Otway Shire Council make certain all valuations for the 2022-2023 rate notices are adjusted for any revision to the valuations at 31 January 2023 is added? This is critical as 20% on the original valuation is far more than 20% on a valuation of about 75% of the original valuation used for the 2022-2023 rate charges, when at that rate it would still be well below a valuation that was queried. Response from the General Manager, Corporate Services.
Through you, Mayor. All properties are valued at a base date of the 1st of January 2023 for the 2023-24 rating year. If any properties were valued as a result of an objection or a supplementary valuation during the year, the new valuation will be used as a base to calculate the valuation for the 2023-2024 year. All objections have since been finalised and ratepayers advised.
Thank you. Moving on to question from Tim Cobb. Question 1. The Skeens Creek community notes the Apollo Bay Skeens Creek Trail project is not progressing and looks for ongoing support for a solution to the lack of walking options in Skeens Creek and the road safety challenges our Apollo Bay Skeens Creek Maringo community faces getting between Apollo Bay and Skeens Creek. Councillors may recall that some years back, Council set aside $100,000 to $200,000 towards the completion of the Apollo Bay Skeens Creek Trail. Also, when Small Town Improvement Program grants were scrapped, councillors resolved to ensure that each council budget specifically included an allocation to projects in small towns to ensure spending on improvements was not solely in the larger centres. We've been waiting for 2 years now for council to commit to a small link path to complete the Hickeys Cutting Loop walk in Skeens Creek, or even provide an estimate of the cost. We're not looking for anything grand, just a rough path to avoid the section of Skeens Creek Road, which is now unsafe for walkers due to the crash barriers erected by regional roads. Will council officers ensure that providing a short path from top of Old Coach Road, Skeens Creek to Hickeys Cutting is included in the 2023 for small town project budget options to be considered by councillors? Response from the General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor. Council will consider all projects as part of the 23-24 budget process.
Thank you. Question from Jason Sram. Question 1. Did the COS pay a management fee to leasee of the Lake Colac Caravan Park while they leased the park? Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. The short-term lease arrangement between Council and Belgravia Pro for the Lake Colac Holiday Park included the provision of a management fee to be paid to the lessee. The income received for the period was greater than the total expenditure for the month, inclusive of that management fee.
Thank you. Question 2. As the football umpires have record low numbers and want to use the youth club as a new home to have better facilities and attract more umpires, but can't use the facilities because a commercial business uses the facilities full time, does the rent of the public facility go to the council, and what is the amount of the rent? Question 3. If the rent goes somewhere else from the youth club hall, did council set the rent as per the policies, and did council allow the rent to go to another party? Response from General Manager, Community and Economy.
Through you, Mayor. The Colac Youth and Recreation Centre is managed by a not-for-profit organisation, Colac Youth and Recreation Centre Inc., in accordance with a management agreement with Council to manage and operate the facility, as resolved by Council in May 2019. As per the management agreement, the Colac Youth and Recreation Centre Inc. set the venue hire fees. The Colac Youth and Recreation Centre Inc. retains all hire fees which are used to maintain the asset as per the schedule of responsibilities.
Thank you. What other council buildings are leased commercially but no rent goes to the council? General Manager, Corporate Services.
Through you, Mayor, Council receives all rent from buildings that are subject to commercial leases.
Thank you. There was another question submitted by Mr Schramm, but I think that was aimed at embarrassing councillors and the CEO, so I won't be providing a response at this time. A question from Marina Lewis. In the light of last month's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report warning that we are close to catastrophic runaway climate impacts, what action is Council taking to support the community to be safe on extreme/catastrophic code days? Specifically, will Council undertake an urgent review and upgrade of away-from-home refuge options, e.g. Copac, the library, in the event of extreme catastrophic code days, such as for rural people outside Colac required to evacuate their home and older people requiring air conditioning? Response from the General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through you, Mayor, Council, in partnership with other members of the Municipal Emergency Management Planning Committee, undertake regular reviews of emergency operational plans, including places of refuge. These reviews consider the trigger and escalation levels required to assist the community make safer decisions and actions. Council, in partnership with other agencies, also participates in programs to build community resilience with all residents, be it in townships, landowners or high-risk areas of natural emergency incidents.
Thank you. That concludes the written questions. There are a number of questions from the gallery, although this gentleman had a written question that we didn't receive, so I might deal with that first. I'll read out a letter from Mr. David Cracknell. Most residents in my street have their mail delivered to the nest of mailboxes at the top of the street. Now that there are 10 properties, we more than qualify for a to-the-gate delivery. I put in a request to Australia Post and was told my road is not safe enough for the postman to drive down. So what I need from the Shire is a basic inspection of my road by the relevant staff and a brief written report as to the safety of my road. It doesn't need to be technical and fancy. Either the road is considered trafficable to motor vehicles or it isn't. Mr. Chasebell, can you take this one, please?
Yeah, we can take that one on notice and provide a response to that question.
So we'll respond in writing in relation to that after an inspection of the road. No worries at all. Yeah, I apologise for that. Is that I'm a bit closer to the microphone. Does that help? Okay. We'll take questions from the gallery, but I just want to remind everyone that you must ask a question, and question time is not for public debate or statements, but we're happy to take questions. So could I have a show of hands again? Thank you. Mr. Billing, would you like to come forward?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Alan Billing, Colac. Excuse me. Late last year, Council received expressions of interest from private interest prepared to take on the provision of tourist information tourist information Shire, either independently or as a joint venture with Council. Has Council made any contact with those interested persons?
Thank you, Mr. Siren.
Through you, Mayor. Council officers have commenced a review as per the resolution of Council at that time. In terms of having contact with those people, yes, we've certainly spoken to those people in recent times.
That's interesting. They weren't aware of it. Just one other question in relation to can Council inform the community on the annual cost to ratepayers of providing a free camping service or free camping sites at Meredith Park?
Through the Mayor, Mr Billing, we'll take that on notice. It's not information we have at hand here.
It's
Thanks.
a significant cost, I understand. I'm sure you should have it.
Well, not on hand here, so we'll take it on notice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Scrow, did you have a question?
Thank you very much for hearing our questions. A few weeks ago we attended a barbecue in the square and we had some questions to ask the local politicians. We did ask some and we were replied, but there was insufficient reply really, so we thought we'd make this more public. So the question I'd like to ask is, what is the agenda for Colac for the 20-minute neighbourhoods, or smart cities as they're known as well?
I'm happy to take that question, Mr. Scrow, if that's all right.
Sure.
Sorry. Oh, okay. It's been suggested perhaps Mr. McNeil, our head planner.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question. The 20-minute neighbourhood's a planning principle that's embedded in state government policy, and it's a principle that Council will be looking to apply when it's doing its planning for the Deans Creek growth area through the precinct structure plan. Right. It's a principle that's generally applied through strategic planning for new residential areas.
Okay.
Did you have another question? There are
There's others that have questions, but
yeah, I'll
thank you.
Someone else raise their hands who had a question. Mr. Beale.
I've sort of got the same question for you, Mayor, but the same question for Doug. Has the Colac Otway Shire engaged or agreed to engage in a smart city agenda? And if so, can the Colac Otway Shire please provide a written copy of our Shire's smart city agenda?
Through you, Mayor, I'm not aware of Council signing up to any smart city initiative. Thanks.
We're probably talking about the same thing that Mr. Scrow was talking about. So whatever you name it, some people said it can be named smart city. What was the name? Neighbourhood, 20-minute neighbourhood, same thing.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the Smart City initiative is certainly an initiative that other councils or organisations in Australia participate in, but I'm not aware that our council does. But the 20-minute neighbourhood concept is one that was first put forward, I think, through the Melbourne Planning for Melbourne strategic plan, and it's now reflected in state government policy, and its aim is to try and encourage facilities for commercial and community recreational facilities to be located within close proximity of housing that the majority of people are able to work and commute to places close to where they live, so that reduces the demand on transport and vehicles, which minimises traffic impacts in cities. So that's a principle that we apply within our planning, as does every other council in Victoria, but we're not specifically signed up to any smart cities initiative.
Thanks, Mr. Minister.
Finish that off, sorry, Mayor. Can you supply us, that's in my question, can you supply us with a copy of that or direct us to a spot on your website that gives us more detail on that agenda?
Through you, Mayor, I'm happy to get in contact after tonight and have a talk about where that information might be sought.
Thank you. Mr. Barrett, you had a question?
Mr Mayor, written answers to written questions submitted to council meetings by members of the community who request their questions to be read out at council meeting will no longer be provided with the answers in writing. Perhaps the CEO could explain the reasoning behind this and how this decision came to be made.
Thanks, CEO.
Through the Mayor, questions that are submitted or from the floor where there is a response provided at the meeting are recorded in the minutes of the meeting because that occurs here. If there are responses we can't provide here or questions we don't get to in the meeting, then we provide written responses to those separately. And that's consistent with Council's governance rules, which say that that's how it works.
Yeah, that's not the question. The question is that the question submitted in writing and requested to be read out at the council meeting, you no longer provide a written response. Now, I've been here in Colac for 10 years, and this is the first time this has happened. There's not that many written questions. I'm just asking, what's the reasoning behind not responding with a written response to a written question?
Well, the way that responses are recorded in the minutes or alternatively provided separately to the minutes are as outlined in the governance rules that Council has adopted. Council's governance rules have been reviewed a number of times in those 10 years. I would say that there would not appear to be a need to duplicate responses in multiple forms. We're just following what the governance rules say.
Last meeting, Mr. Serin, General Manager Mr. Serin, gave a complex answer to a number of written questions. And how can someone write down the detail of his answer?
So
because
the response is in the minutes.
In our case, when I went to our ratepayers meeting, I didn't have a written answer. We had submitted a written question, and I think it's reasonable to expect a written answer, especially the involving some legal details.
Yeah. So if a question is submitted to Council in writing but not to the council meeting, then you would have the responses, all of the responses in writing. Questions that are read out at the meeting and responded to at the meeting are captured in writing in the minutes. That's where you find the response.
And how long does it take for the minutes to come out? About 2 months?
Oh, sorry, at the next meeting.
So the second question is just, this is a quote to give the question some context. It's a quote from ABC online article by the Minister for Local Government over the sacking of the Moira Shire Corporation. And this is the quote: "Councils must properly represent the communities they serve. In this case, Moira residents deserve to have a council that puts their interests first," the Minister said. So in our case, Colac Otway Shire residents deserve to have a council that puts its interests first. By making this decision to deny written replies to questions in writing that members of the community consider in the public interest, how have you demonstrated that you put the interests of the community first?
Sorry, I didn't capture the question.
Well, if I submit it to you in writing, will you give me a written response? Not at this meeting, but if I send it by email, will you give me a written response?
Yes, if you write to Council, you should receive a written response.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Barrett. Any other questions? Lady at the back. Sorry, I'm not sure of your name yet.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity to ask a question. My name's Catherine, and I represent a large group in this community that is really concerned about the safety of the 5G towers, the increase of surveillance on our privacy, the talk of building smart cities and the 2030 climate agenda, government's Paris Agreement, and the lack of consent by the people. All the above are using great amounts of rate taxpayers' funds, not to mention precious resources, which could be directed elsewhere. Would the councillors present today be prepared to meet with us so we can all understand future plans around council projects, smart cities, etc., and perhaps together we can better shape our shire for every person that lives here with input from all residents, not just council members?
Well, yeah, you want to go first, Doug, or you want me to?
Well, through you, Mr Mayor, I'm not quite sure who in council's best placed to answer that question, because council, as I said before, hasn't shown any interest in participating in a smart cities initiative. But if the question is, can someone in council meet with the community to talk about issues that are of concern to the community, then yes, we can arrange that. We'd have to understand a bit more specifically the best person to do that.
Well, you keep saying that you're not connected with the smart cities agenda, but can I ask you, are the 5G towers connected to the surveillance cameras up Murray Street in Colac, also connected to the 20-minute neighbourhoods?
Sorry, I can take that because I have direct knowledge of those cameras down the main street, and they're not.
They're not, okay. Okay, so back to the first question. Can we meet councillors and some of the public and discuss some of these things?
I'm happy to look at that and take advice from the CEO, but yes, we'll be in contact about that.
Okay.
It would help. Did you have your questions written down there?
Yes, I have a lot of questions.
Are you able to provide a copy, or we'll just take a photo of it or something, just so that we can consider the topics and work out?
Well, I have sent questions into the Shire before, but
okay.
I wasn't able to come to the meeting, so I didn't know if those questions got answered, and I don't know how to find them in all the...
We'll be in touch then. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point? Mr. Arundel?
Simon Arundel from Bungadore. I learn what I can about the Shire through the pages of the Colac Herald, and I read recently that you sold land and had quite a windfall of money. Reading the articles in the Colac Herald, I was greatly dismayed because the councillors seemed to act like a bunch of kids with a bag of lollies. Seeing as it's such a windfall, how about we make a major move for something that might progress Colac and Apollo Bay? Apollo Bay has a problem that the day will come when it will need a ring road. Perhaps that could be looked into. The botanical gardens were opened here in about 1880. It's high time we did something else here. And as I've said in past meetings, why don't you put into plan, it could be a 50-year plan, for a road around Lake Colac where thousands of campers could gather. You could have all your races out of the road of the rest of the public, and it would bring absolutely a torrent of people into Colac. Melbourne's growing. They've got fewer and fewer areas to go through. A body of water like Lake Colac might entice them to come this way. I just ask you to give those two projects some thought. The bypass and a road around Lake Colac. It'd be Colac's version of Lake Wendouree. Wouldn't that be great? Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Arundel. Your views are noted. Anybody else? Right, thanks everyone. That concludes question time for today. I note we don't have any petitions or joint letters. Councillor, is there any declarations of conflict of interest? Councillor Finnegan.
Thank you, Mayor. Regarding agenda item 9.1, I'd like to declare a general conflict of interest in relation to this matter. A relative of mine owns property within the area subject to the development plan overlay. And in relation to agenda item 9.6, I'd like to declare a material conflict of interest in relation to this matter. Outside of the benefit to council, I'll receive a direct personal benefit if this proposal is approved, insofar as it will qualify me to sit on external boards and organisations. So I will be leaving the room on matters agenda items 9.1 and 9.6.
Thanks very much, Councillor Finnegan. Councillors, I'd like to move to the confirmation of minutes of the following council meeting held on Wednesday, the 22nd of February 2023. Do I have a mover? Councillor Hart. Is that to be seconded? Councillor Costin. Is it to be opposed? Thank you. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks, councillors. Carried 7-0. Haven't said that for a while, councillors. Councillors, we'll move to the officers' reports. The first item is 9.1. As we've heard, Councillor Finnegan has declared a conflict. Thanks, Councillor. Item 9.1, Planning Scheme Amendment, Colac West and J Barry's Road. The purpose of this item is to inform Council about a planning scheme amendment proposed in Colac and to obtain a resolution to seek authorisation from the Minister to exhibit the amendment. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No questions. Councillors, the officers have provided... Oh, sorry, Councillor Hanson.
Can I just ask a question about the changes to the Colac West development and whether you've had feedback from, the owners of those parcels of land to this amendment?
Through you, Mayor, we've had feedback from a number of sources about the demand for industrial land in Colac, and whilst there is obviously a potential demand for large sites in the vicinity of 5 hectares.
I was asking about the Colac West development, not the J Barry's Road, the other one.
My apologies. Sorry, can you just repeat the question then? Sorry.
I just wondered whether you've had any feedback regarding this amendment from the owners of the land out Colac West.
No, we haven't, through you, Mayor, we haven't had any feedback. We haven't directly consulted those landowners at this point. The intention would be, if Council is supportive of the resolution tonight, that we would get in contact with those landowners and explain our intentions. Largely, this amendment is about putting a little bit more detail in the current schedule to the development plan overlay to reflect the key features that we've already been talking to landowners about that would appear in that area. So there wouldn't be any new requirements being imposed through these changes. It's really about reflecting the sorts of features we've already been discussing over the last couple of years. And it would also just include a reference to the need for a shared infrastructure funding plan, which again is something which we've been developing in consultation with landowners. What we feel the need to do this amendment is to make sure that there is a bit more detail in the planning scheme to put behind the development plan to ensure that it minimises the risk to council of the planning that we're doing being brought into question at some future point in time.
Any other questions? Councillors, the officers have provided... Oh, sorry, Max. Go, Councillor Arnott.
Sorry, Mayor Chris, thank you for the opportunity for a question. Just some reassurance from the planning officers in respect to inquiries that we've just received tonight and access to the Lake Foreshore for future thought for either road access and or footpaths.
Through you, Mayor, with the Colac West development plan, one of the key aspects of that will be ensuring that future residential development has frontage onto a road and that road then fronts onto open space, which would form an extension of the foreshore to Lake Colac, and that there would be a shared path provided within that open space. So the council investigation at the present time around extension of the pathway around the lake would be incorporated into the thinking for future development of that development plan area.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with a report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor White, thank you. Is there a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Is it to be opposed? Thank you, Councillor White.
Thanks, Mayor. Just briefly, I think it's important I'll talk in two bits. The first one regarding Colac West, it gives some clarity to those involved in the development around the expectations of the key designs and the requirements, and so it's very transparent and they understand those expectations, and also particularly about a shared infrastructure plan. And the second one, I think, is responding to the demand and the need out in Barry's Road that the 5 hectare minimum lot size has prevented that development. So I think both these amendments are going to be a good consideration for us to move.
Thanks, Councillor Watt. Councillor Hanson, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, I think these amendments are both worthwhile. I think particularly the amendment for the J Barry's Road industrial area. It's I think one of the first things that when I first got onto council that we approved. I think was the planning scheme with that industrial area. But it does show that more flexibility is needed, and sometimes. It takes a really long time for these developments to get up and for something to happen. And I think this amendment will hopefully create more flexibility that will, lead to actual development happening in that area.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor Chris. I just wanted to speak in support of the motion. I think it's appropriate that the officers have brought this to us. I congratulate them on the formation of the recommendations and acknowledge what Councillor Kate and Margaret have said, and agree with them on this motion. And also just to reassure the community that we have had reassurances from our officers about the shared infrastructure costs behind this, such as sewage and water and drainage, that the council's liabilities will be appropriately protected in that context, and that this will be appropriately still developed.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillors, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried 6-0. Can we get... Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Councillors, we move to item 9.2, affordable housing provision areas being rezoned residential in Colac. The purpose of this item is to provide a degree of flexibility in the provision of social and affordable housing in the new residential estate proposed as part of the current planning scheme amendment in Colac. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No questions? Oh, yeah, thanks, Councillor Hanson.
Mr McNeil, can you just explain, I guess, what this, if the officer recommendation is moved as a motion successfully, what it actually does, why it's needed, and and whether the flexibility that it gives is actually really social housing, or what the mix is of the housing that we're now discussing.
Through you, Mayor. So this resolution really relates back to a resolution that Council made in the middle of last year relating to 2 planning scheme amendments to rezone land at Limonite. For both those 2 amendments, the Council resolved that it wanted officers to negotiate with the developers for social housing to be established as a part of those developments. What this report to Council tonight is asking councillors is to effectively provide greater flexibility for the officers to negotiate with these developers of these two sites for different types of affordable accommodation other than social housing, or at least provide the flexibility for that to be considered. It may well be that social housing is provided in both instances, but the request is that we be given the imprimatur to look at other alternatives. So affordable housing is housing that's provided at a discount to people within a certain income range from the lower end of the market for rental. And there has been some interest expressed by developers about different types of affordable accommodation. So this would really just give the officers a little bit more flexibility in looking at the different outcomes that might be achieved.
No other questions? Thank you. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with this report. Does anyone wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Arnott, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Costin, thank you. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Arnott, did you wish to speak?
I think the motion pretty much speaks for itself, and the explanation that Kate has asked the officer to provide covers it. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is a sensible recommendation, and thanks to officers for bringing it forward. It fits well with both our social housing strategy and also with our declaration of a key and essential worker affordable housing crisis. We need to look at both aspects here, both social housing and providing, where we can, some lower cost housing so that people can afford to live and work and enjoy life in Colac Otway Shire. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor White.
Thank you. Just to highlight how important it is that we support such an amendment to allow flexibility. Social housing and affordable housing are really critical issues across Australia at the moment, and for us in the Shire. We read about it in the media every day. In fact, it was on the front page of the Colac Herald a week or so ago. And I think to give options and give flexibility to explore different models to our developers is a really positive move. And just to say that a recent report that was done by the G21 Alliance highlighted that in Colac Otway Shire, we actually need another 344 social housing properties to meet the current demand. So, and social housing is for people, there are people in housing stress, that's calculated with housing stress, and that's people who are paying more than 30% of their income to house themselves. And we've also had recent studies about women over 55 being the most vulnerable to homelessness, and again, that is something that we need to address and get our heads around. So I really do support making it more than possible and encouraging, enabling developers to take this on and giving them the flexibility to provide different models of housing.
Thanks, Councillor Watt. Any other councillor? Thanks, councillors. I'll put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. It's carried 7-0. Councillors, item 9.3, Barwon South West Climate Alliance membership. The purpose of this item is to provide an update to Council about the work of the Barwon South West Climate Alliance and seek a resolution concerning future membership of the Alliance beyond the 2022-2023 financial year. Do councillors have questions of officers? Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, and I'll just flag, I've got a motion to move.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson.
I was just going to ask the question, what has been achieved in the time that we have been a member of this alliance?
Through you, Mayor, I suppose it's important to understand that the Barwon South West Climate Alliance is a very new organisation, so it's only been around for 18 months as an organisation, and the executive officer was appointed and started her role in July last year. So in that 8 months, there's been a lot of organisation of the work of the group. There's been an annual plan prepared which establishes the 9 priorities that the Alliance members will be working on going forward. There's been a range of working groups set up across the different members on different initiatives within those 9 priorities, and the aim is that those working groups will then work on particular projects that will be pursued by Alliance members going forward. I have attached to the Council report today a summary of what the Alliance has achieved over the course of that period. There's been a number of things which the Alliance has advocated on behalf of Council, together with other greenhouse alliances in the state, and so they're listed there. Some of those things include, for example, the National Electric Vehicle Strategy, and there was consultation with the councils and the alliances around what are the priorities of different communities, and we've made a submission through this process with other alliance members. So mainly to date, it's been advocacy on different issues and a lot of the work to commence efforts over the next 12 months and 2 years to attract external funding and undertake larger scale projects. It is worth noting that Council's commenced a fleet transition plan in collaboration with a couple of other councils within the Alliance, which has come through from this work. We're hoping to have that work finished by the middle of this year. It'll provide a roadmap for how Council will invest in its light and heavy fleet so that we can work towards net zero emissions on our transport. And that's a piece of work which will be cheaper to Council than it would have been if we had pursued it by ourselves.
Councillor Hanson.
With that fleet transition work, how much did we have to pay to be part of that?
It's expected that Council will pay $25,000 as a contribution to that, and so that's coming out of funds that Council has set aside in its budget for sustainability initiatives and fleet management.
Councillor Finnegan.
Thank you for your answer just then, Mr McNeil. Are you able to confirm that the amount roughly that, or the amount that the Climate Alliance has received in membership fees since the time the Executive Officer came on in July is in the ballpark of $135,000?
Through you, Mayor. I believe that the annualised cost of the Executive Officer is somewhere in the vicinity of $110,000 per year, which is inclusive of superannuation and other costs. And that's an annual figure.
Thank you, Mr McNeil. That wasn't my question, though. The question was, while you've just said that the understanding is that the annualised cost of the Executive Officer is in the realm of $110,000, including salary and superannuation and other benefits, is the amount that has been received in membership fees from the 7 member councils and 3 partner organisations, does that total to $135,000?
The membership fees that the Alliance would receive on an annual basis is marginally more than the $135,000. The costs of the Executive Officer is in the vicinity per year of the $110,000 that I mentioned. To date, in the life of the Alliance, the majority of the expenditure has been in relation to salary costs. There hasn't been a project that's been initiated to date where funds from those memberships has made a contribution.
And just following on from that, so essentially the Barwon Southwest Climate Alliance has expended roughly 80% of the membership fees it's taken in on executive salary since the Executive Officer came on board in July. And that's not the only money that has been put into the Alliance. We have, as I understand it, and just mentioned before, we put $25,000 towards the Alliance for the fleet renewal program, is that correct?
Through you, Mayor, the Fleet Transition Plan is a project that councils signed up with Golden Plains and Warrnambool councils to do. So it's arisen through collaborative efforts in the Alliance, but it's a project between those 3 councils ultimately. Golden Plains is the host council, and our council will pay a contribution towards the total cost of that project.
So the outcomes of that program could have been achieved if the Colac Otway Shire was not a member of the Barwon South West Climate Alliance, is that correct?
Through you, Mayor, it's possible in any project for council to collaborate with other councils to achieve those outcomes. In this particular case, the opportunity arose because of council's membership of the Alliance and the work that the officers undertake by regularly meeting and discussing the climate-related issues with those councils.
Any other councillor have any questions? Councillor Hanson, you flagged a motion.
Yeah, I have got a motion that council discontinues its membership of the Barwon South West Climate Alliance.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Finnegan. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Costin. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you. Firstly, I want to state that I think that the Colac Otway Shire needs to look at as many ways as possible to continue the work that it has already done in decreasing our impact on the environment and our carbon footprint. And we've done an amazing amount of things over, the last so many years, and even worked our way towards being carbon neutral. It has meant that we have had to buy carbon offsets, which, I don't particularly want to support again, but I think we need to be looking at our own operations. I don't have any faith in this alliance that it's going to really achieve a lot that we couldn't do on our own without paying an executive officer a six-figure salary to do so. We have a number of alliances with other councils that work really well. We have good working relationships with other councils. And I think the point was really proven to me when we had the discussion about the $25,000 that we have to spend to investigate fleet transition. I know there's councils that are close to us that are not spending that kind of money and are transitioning their fleets and don't need to be part of an alliance and don't need to spend $25,000 to do it. I don't even know where that actually got approved, but I guess it was through the budget process. And, I guess as councillors, we don't have any control over, I guess the minutiae details of what budgets are being spent of. But I'm pretty flabbergasted by that. I think also in the report it speaks about...
Mayor Chris, could I move a point of order here, please?
You can raise a point of order.
If I can raise a point of order, this motion is in contradictory to the original recommendation and motion up here. If that original recommendation and motion is lost, then Councillor Hanson's motion would be won. I think it's immaterial to the original motion in that context.
There's no motion on the table.
I understand.
It's actually the opposite of the original motion. Actually, it's not valid in that context.
Yes, I understand your point, Councillor Arnott, but we didn't have a motion on the table, and I allowed Councillor Hanson to move this motion, which is in effect contrary to the officer's recommendation, which hadn't been put on the table yet. So Councillor Hanson has the right to run her argument.
Thank you. Yes, I know it can be confusing, but officers don't move motions, councillors do. And this is, I guess, what councillors do. We move motions and we don't have to follow what the officers recommend. So I have lost my train of thought now. But, yes, we're reading the report. I was kind of pretty unimpressed by the report, and but not unimpressed by things that council have already done. And like in the report, we talk about, moving to electric vehicles or even energy efficient street lighting. Well, we've already done those things over the past years, and we haven't had to be a part of an alliance and pay an executive officer a six-figure salary to do it. It was discussed around carbon offsets and potentially localised carbon offsets. But if we have to spend $25,000 to investigate electric vehicles, then I'm tipping we'll be spending an enormous amount of money to pay some consultant to help us out with potentially localised carbon offsets, which I am, very supportive of looking into. But obviously, when all the money of the alliance goes to paying the officer, we're just going to have to be continually putting money upon money, in this alliance. So I can't really see what this alliance is doing apart from organising a few meetings. But I will say, once again, that there's a lot of opportunities with decreasing our carbon footprint, and through that they can end up paying for themselves through cost savings. But do you need to form an alliance to do it? I don't think you need to. And I'll just draw councillors' attention to the statement in our last quarterly performance from our CEO about the budget situation that we're in, the rising costs of everything, which is twice as much, if not more, of the rate cap. So I guess the question that wasn't asked, like if we're going to continually to spend money on things like this alliance, what aren't we doing? $25,000 to investigate electric vehicles, plus the $15,000 every year for the Climate Alliance, another 3 years on top of the 15 that's already been spent to just produce a half-finished report. Well, it's not particularly impressive, and that's why I'm moving this motion to discontinue our involvement in this membership.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Finnegan, did you wish to speak or reserve?
I'll reserve for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Costin, you're opposed?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hanson, for articulating your support of action on climate change and the need to further reduce our carbon emissions. That's fantastic. I think it's early days for us to make a judgment on this Climate Alliance and our membership and the benefits of this. You recall when we first looked at membership of the Alliance that there were a number of alliances, similar alliances around that had been running for a number of years, which had returned millions of dollars back to councils, back to their member councils for very small investment. In regard to the point that we can do this ourselves, well, I don't think we can. I don't think we have the capacity, we don't have the resources to do that, and we can effectively purchase part of the resource, which is working towards our objective at a much lower cost than we would have to pay if we had the resource ourselves. And we do need to be a member, we do need to be on board with this, we do need to choose the future we want rather than sit back and just let the future unfold around us. I'm particularly impressed by the proposal for local carbon offsetting of emissions. I think that has great potential to attract external funding, to attract investment within our shire and to deliver benefits both for Colac Otway Shire and for the environment. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Costin. Any other councillor? Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I hope we've got past the argument that climate change is an extremely important issue in terms of addressing, in terms of both mitigation and adaptation. There was mention of work that's previously been done through this shire, and this shire, to be honest, from my view, has been dining out on the work that was done in the last 10 years for quite some time now. In relation to the street lighting project and a project looking into the risk of different areas that were subject to sea level rise arising from climate change, a lot of these projects were led from council officers who had to handle these particular projects and spend a considerable time and did a fantastic job in terms of working with other municipalities. So in a sense, doing the role that may have otherwise been done by a climate alliance like this. And I would put it to you that the wages of those people involved in terms of the cost borne by council would have been a lot more than the $15,000 contribution that is made by this council if we continue to remain a member of this particular alliance. The reality is that state and federal governments are finally realising that these are important issues that need to be addressed. And when they're looking for funding, whether it's issues associated with climate change, adaptation and mitigation, or whether it's looking at city deal projects, which is a project for which we got significant funding in relation to through G21. They're looking at partnerships. It suits governments, state and federal and both colours of government, to look at regional partnerships and councils working together so they can get the biggest bang for their buck. And I think if we think we're going to do this alone, you put at risk a lot more than a $15,000 membership fee. And I think it's also worth recalling that we did investigate whether G21 might be an appropriate place for this sort of work to be done, and G21 made it clear that they didn't have the capacity for that. So it was only after we investigated whether G21 might be able to handle it that we looked at this alliance. I think it's very short-sighted of this municipality if we're going to jeopardise potential funding on this issue because of a $15,000 membership fee.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor Chris. I'd just like to endorse the comments by Councillor Costin and Hart. And I'd actually admit that I have concerns about this sort of organisation in the first place, and that was just another bureaucracy that we're spending money on. But since further investigation and in respect to it, I think that our $15,000 a year investment is quite small, along the lines of what Councillor Hart just mentioned, that money would go quickly in the salaries otherwise. We have the opportunity to leverage off the experience of other groups if we continue our membership. And my experience with developing regional partnerships with other organisations, they can be difficult to do if you try to do it from scratch. What we have here is a regional partnership that's already formed that we can leverage from. And I think that that has got significant value, and it goes statewide, joining with others of similar nature. So that has greater value. Unfortunately, I can't support your motion, and thank you for clarifying the process. I do appreciate that, your patience.
Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Councillor White.
Just very quickly, I want to agree that the alliance is very much in its infancy, and I think it's very early days to be making judgments at this point. But also to say that collaboration, I think, is a really important aspect of what we're signing up to here, and the importance of collaboration partnerships. We can't go solo. We achieve a lot more when we're at the table with our partner councils and institutions like Deakin University and Barwon Water. We're all at the table together, and we can achieve a lot more together than we can going solo. And governments will want to deal with alliances, there's no doubt about that, rather than individual councils, especially when they're considering major projects and funding and policy development. So we don't want to put Colac at our Shire at a disadvantage by not joining and saying we can go it alone. Collaboration and partnership is the way to go. So I won't be supporting this motion.
Thanks, Councillor White. Councillor Finnegan, you're reserved.
Thanks, Councillor Potter, and I appreciate the input from all other councillors on this matter. I need to work out how I put this. I'm supporting the motion put forward by Councillor Hanson. Really, we don't need to be a member of the Barwon Southwest Climate Alliance to achieve positive climate-friendly outcomes for our community. According to the briefings and according to answers that we've heard today in this meeting, the Barwon Southwest Climate Alliance has collected a total of at least $135,000 in membership fees since the executive officer was appointed. Of this $135,000 or so, at least $110,000 of that Approximately 80% of that has been spent on paying the salary and superannuation of one person, the Executive Officer of the Barwon South West Climate Alliance, with other funds being requested in member organisations. The reality is that Corangamite Shire Council is not a member, nor is Glenelg Shire Council. Moyne Shire Council is reconsidering its membership. It'd be much more preferable for council to spend this $15,000 a year in-house to achieve positive outcomes for the environment, rather than send that money to an external organisation so they can pay their executive officer, who after 9 months has yet to even complete the action plan which the Alliance was set up to create and implement.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, I think councils, and I think Mr McNeill said it, councils can partner and collaborate with other councils, but you don't need to do a joint alliance to do that. You don't need to pay $15,000 a year. And now we're now talking about joining up for another 3, which to add to the 15, we're now talking about $60,000. And we can collaborate with other councils without the need for the alliance, and the councils that we are collaborating with around the electric vehicle and fleet transition, you know, they're councils that we have very good working relationships with anyway, and it's only, I think, 2 councils. So I think you barely need an alliance, need to pay for the bureaucracy, and I'm glad Councillor Arnott raised the word bureaucracy. We don't need to pay for another layer of bureaucracy to have a conversation with our neighbours about, you know, fleet procurement. I mean, it's a basic thing that council does all the time. We procure all types of fleet and vehicles. I don't see what the big deal is around the electric vehicles. So, you know, nothing that's been said here makes me think that this is an alliance that we should be part of, and I hope councillors support my motion.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Against? The motion is lost 2-5. Did you want division, Kate? Councillor, division's called. All those in favour? Councillor Hanson, Councillor Finnegan. All those against? Councillor Costin, Councillor White, Councillor Hart, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Potter. Thanks, councillors. The officers have provided a recommendation. No one foreshadowed the moving of that, so that matter rests. The report's still there.
Or I put it to you, Mr Mayor, that the issue has been addressed because a resolution to discontinue our membership has been lost. So my point of order is I'll put it to you that by losing a resolution that is explicitly to discontinue our membership has effectively dealt with the matter.
Well, the implication of that is that, yes, the membership is to continue.
May I, through you, Mayor, with due respect, suggest or ask whether the CEO would see it that way, in which case we can move on.
Council doesn't have an existing resolution for ongoing membership. It had a specific 1-year resolution with a report back, which we have now done, for Council to consider ongoing membership. There was no foreshadowing of a motion in the event that this one was lost, but I'm happy to refer that matter to our Manager of Governance if they have a different view.
There's no requirement. I'll move it. I'll move the recommendation.
We'll wait and get advice to see whether we can first.
Thanks for the question, through you, Mayor. I think, as we have done previously, we have actually allowed the council, where they haven't foreshadowed a motion or an alternative motion in this particular instance, to put another motion forward.
And that has been our practice, but I think in this, I think we need to learn from this and see whether...
No, I'll move a point of order. If you read...
Go ahead.
The point of order, if you read the governance rules, is that there's no compulsion. You're not compelled to foreshadow a motion. Foreshadowing motion has no particular rule under the governance rules. You can choose to foreshadow a motion, but you don't have to. So in those circumstances, I think the fact that one hasn't been foreshadowed does not mean we can't now move a resolution because this report has not been dealt with.
Yes, thank you. And I did read that last night, actually. So in that case, I'll allow the fact that we have an officer's report still on the table. Is there a mover for a motion?
I move the recommendation.
Is that to be seconded? Councillor White, is it to be opposed? Councillor Finnegan, thank you. Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm mindful that we've had a bit of discussion around this, but I think that alliances such as these are important in terms of securing funding, and this is a very important issue in terms of mitigation and adaptation in relation to climate change. I would make the point that the officer in question, my understanding from what we were told, has been employed for 8 months. So I don't think it's quite so fair to some of the comments might have given the impression they haven't done anything in that time. Allowing these foundations for funding opportunities doesn't necessarily all get sorted out in 8 months. Look at some of the reports and documents that have done with G21, and then funding arrives perhaps a year or more later for significant projects. So we've had the proof, we've had the demonstration that these alliances are valuable, and I think that in light of the fact that we investigated other options, which were whether we could do this with G21, and that came no capacity there, that it's appropriate that we continue to be a membership of this particular alliance. And at $15,000, I think it's a small investment with a potential high return.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor White, you reserve. Councillor Finnegan, you opposed?
I appreciate, again, the input of Councillor Hart on this matter. As I stated before, I don't think there's anything that we couldn't achieve outside of the alliance that we can achieve inside of it. I disagree with spending essentially another $45,000 on the matter, but the reality is that, as I can see it, and could you possibly scroll up a bit so I can just read the officer recommendation, if it's still up there? Apologies. So the officer recommendation there, so obviously the motion there is that council continues its membership of the Barwon South West Climate Alliance beyond the 2022-23 financial year. And it doesn't actually have an end date in mind. So essentially what we're asking is for this to roll over in perpetuity, which I also disagree with. But I've made my points, I think, in seconding the previous lost motion by Councillor Hanson, that we don't need to spend this money to achieve positive outcomes for the climate. We don't need to spend it as members of the Climate Alliance. And that I think that we can be a better place spending that money internally, to be honest, especially given the current budgetary situations. I'd rather see that money spent within the organisation rather than sending it out.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Any other councillor? Councillor White, sorry, Kate, did you want to go? Yeah, Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, so I won't be supporting this motion. I have a real concern that this is endless, this membership. If they've achieved so little after 12 months or 18 months, as I think Mr McNeil said they've sort of been in operating, then my goodness, to not have a date up there of when we might review it is staggering. But anyway, that's the situation we've got here, and it'll probably get support. I do also want to flag that a number of our neighbouring councils aren't involved in the alliance. And I also do have a concern around the alliance with some of the large, quite dominant councils that are in the alliance, and I do worry, and I'll just flag it, that they might have a much bigger voice than we have at the table, even though everybody's paying the exact same amount to be in it. But, I just really do wonder whether, the lion's share will end up going to some of these larger councils, and time will tell. But I would prefer to keep the money flagged to go to the Barwon South West Alliance spent on our community. I think the community is getting a bit tired of seeing money just sort of spent on meetings and reports and you know, things that aren't tangible to the community. So I will absolutely not be supporting this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Any other councillor? Councillor White, you're reserved.
I think we've all said quite a lot about this, but just to reiterate, I really don't believe that we could achieve the same outcomes going solo than we would achieve partnering with our partnering in the alliance. Collaborative practice, going solo and undertaking partnerships in collaborative practice is really hard work. It's long, tiring legwork that if you take that on by yourself and not do it as part
Point of order. I don't think the councillors opposing have said that they're against collaboration. They've just said you don't need an alliance to do it.
Yes.
My point is
that is correct.
Okay, sorry. My point is that collaboration as part of an alliance is a much stronger and more robust way to achieve the outcomes that we're hoping to achieve. There's 9 of these alliances across the state, and most councils, there are a few councils who've chosen not to join the alliance, but the vast majority of councils have joined these alliances. And I really think it is an investment for our community to join the alliance and get the outcomes that will, and some of these include collaborative procurement, joint funding opportunities, access to resources, knowledge sharing, capacity building, training, networking, and advocacy. And advocacy is much stronger if it's coming from an alliance. Governments want to work with alliances, not solo councils. So I strongly support staying in the alliance as part of the Barwon South West.
Thanks, Councillor White. Councillor Hart, right, a reply.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just on the issue of an end date, we don't have an end date with our membership of G21 or Great South Coast Alliance, MAV, all these things. This could be ended by another resolution. If this resolution is passed, it would be open to council to decide in a year's time, 2 years' time, 3 years' time, or a new council after the next election that they're no longer a member. It just means that until there's a resolution to no longer be a member, council will be a member. It doesn't mean that it's going to be
Point of order. Can we just clarify that is the case, that we can end our membership in 12 months if we want to, or 18 months?
Well, that's the way I read it.
I think the point Councillor Hart's making is council could choose through resolution to end its membership in any alliance at any time.
Councillor Hart.
I'm not sure how far I was into my 2 minutes, Mayor. The other issue of perhaps one council dominating it, I think we need to look at our relationships with other councils through MAV and through G21 and our experiences of that. And I think our experiences have been that other councils, whether they're larger than us or smaller than us, there's really balanced discussions and there's really good relationships between mayors and councillors operating, so I don't see that as a risk. The other issue is that we could use the $15,000. Now, what I'm hearing from the opponents to this resolution, we could use it for staff to do this work, we could use it for projects to do this work, but we could also use it for other projects for the community. Well, I think we've just spent that same $15,000 about 3 or 4 times or even more. The reality is, for what we can get back on this issue, and we're working in partnership, can be a lot more than one lot of $15,000. And from what I've heard from the community and what we should have all heard through the council plan process, that addressing climate change in terms of mitigation and adaptation is an important priority of the community and is in fact reflected in our council plan.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. The motion is carried. Motion is carried 5-2. Division. All those in favour? Councillor Costin, Councillor White, Councillor Hart, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Potter. Against? Councillor Hanson, Councillor Finnegan. Thanks, Council. Thanks, councillors. Councillors, we'll move on to item 9.4, appointment to committees and external organisations. The purpose of this item is to appoint councillors to committees and external organisations. Do we have any questions of officers? No questions, thank you. The officers have provided a recommendation which is on the screen. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Is it to be seconded? Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Might suit Councillor Finnegan, I'm not too sure.
You taking a stab at my driving, Mayor?
Oh. Have we read everything? Thanks to Councillor Finnegan and seconded by Councillor Hanson. We have a motion on the table. Is to be opposed? Councillor Finnegan, did you wish to speak?
How good it is when we can all work together and get these sorts of things sorted out with, with minimal fuss, and when everyone engages with each other on the matter, we can work together and get the best outcomes and avoid issues. So I'm very glad that we've been able to agree on our committee assignments, it seems, and here's to us.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson, did you wish to speak?
I'll just say these are really important committees, community committees, and some of the representative groups. So I thank councillors for sharing them around a bit more than in previous years, but they are really important mainly community groups that councillors are appointed to. So good luck to everybody with the committees that they've been appointed to.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Did anybody else want to comment? No worries, thank you. Councillors, I'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Item is carried 7-0. Councillors, moving on to item 9.5, project budget adjustments and cash reserve transfer. The purpose of this report is to present the project budget adjustments and cash reserve transfers for council ratification and approval. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No questions. Officers have provided a recommendation. Does the council wish to move a motion in relation to this? Thanks, Councillor White. Is it to be seconded? Thanks, Councillor Costin. Is it to be opposed? Councillor White.
Thank you, Mayor. Just very briefly to say thank you for such a comprehensive report. This is something that has been new to Council over the last few months, and it really brings a clarity to the status of our projects and how they are funded, and to highlight that things will change and there are adjustments along the way, and it enables us to understand that and how projects are being progressed. So the report and tables are really helpful for us in understanding the adjustments, and they do bring a high level of transparency. So I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Costin, did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. When we set up projects and budgets for the future, the only thing we know for certain is the future is uncertain, and this gives us some idea of changes that are needed along the way, not just for councillors but also for our community. It's great, it follows our transparency policy, and it's a good move forward. Thank you to the CEO and officers involved.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillors, I'll put the motion to vote. All those in favour? Thank you. It's carried 7-0. Item 9.6. Are we happy to keep going, councillors? Did anyone want a break? No? All right. Yeah. No. You have declared a conflict, so thank you. Just go over it again for us, please, if you don't mind.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mayor. I was certain that everyone would have been sick of my voice by this point, but Chair, I would like to declare a material conflict of interest in this matter. Outside the benefit of council, I will derive direct personal benefit if this proposal is approved, insofar as it will qualify me to apply to sit on external boards and organisations. So I will vacate the room.
Thank you, Councillor Finnegan. Councillors, 9.6, purpose of this item is to seek council approval for Councillor Tosh Jake Finnegan to undertake the 5-day online company directors course offered by the Australian Institute of Company Directors, commencing Friday the 5th of May 2023. Do councillors have any questions? Sorry, Councillor Hart.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My question would be in relation to council-related boards such as G21 board, library board. Is it compulsory that a councillor must have done this training before they could possibly be appointed to the various council-related boards, if I can put it that way?
Through the Mayor, I'm unaware of any requirements like that for councillor-related boards or council-related boards.
When you're ready, Mayor, I'd foreshadow an alternative.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Are there any other questions? Councillor Hart?
Thanks, Mayor. That's my alternative. Yes, I move that when you're ready.
Thank you. I'll just give everyone a chance to have a quick look and then call for a seconder. Is there a seconder for the motion? Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Is it to be opposed? Councillor Hart?
Thanks, Mayor. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge Councillor Finnegan's enthusiasm and contribution to council in the short time that they've been a councillor since earlier this year. My focus in terms of putting this particular resolution is thinking there should be more of a strategic approach to councillor training. And there has been in the past, I think it was in the 2016, 2017, somewhere around then. I think the councillors should have an opportunity to identify training needs, and perhaps a council officer in that area might be able to help that process. It should be optional. And that having identified training needs, that we can look at courses or training that's directly relevant to our duties on council. And that's not to say that the company directors course isn't beneficial. I just think that perhaps we could get a better value out of it if we look at all the training potential of councillors and what skill sets might be needed, where there's gaps, and what courses might be available to fill those if councillors want to undertake that. I did want to make it clear, and I think it's in point 6, that I'm not suggesting, and this resolution doesn't intend to restrict the various compulsory training that councillors have to do. It's just a more strategic approach to training needs and priorities.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor Hanson, did you wish to say anything?
Comment that I think this is a sensible motion from Councillor Hart. And I'll just make the point that you certainly encourage all different types of people to run for council, and everybody comes to the table with a different skill set. And I think a more strategic approach to training can then help balance those skill sets and, you know, fill gaps where there are gaps. And I think that's what we need to do. And I definitely think the last few years that has really been interrupted. But I think putting that back on the table is a really good idea, and I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried 6-0. Could we have Councillor Finnegan return, please, Jill? Welcome back, Councillor Finnegan. We're moving on to item 9.7, Contract 2309, Banking and Bill Paying Services. The purpose of this item is to recommend to Council that Contract 2309, Banking and Bill Paying Services, be awarded to the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hanson.
Can you just explain, I imagine it's you, Mr Tenney, just explain exactly what this is, these bill paying services, because I understand it through the report, but I would just like that sort of layman's quick explanation of what this actually is.
Through you, Mayor, in simplest form, this is just a contract to facilitate all our banking services and bill paying services. So it's just our day-to-day transacting.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Any other questions? Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with this report. Did Councillor wish to move it? Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Is it to be seconded? Somebody? Thanks, Councillor Arnott. Is to be opposed? Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Did you wish to say anything?
Yeah, I think it's just pretty straightforward, but this is the kind of, this is just moving the service to the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and it's just the kind of service in your everyday interaction might be when you come in and pay a bill at the counter, at the front counter. So, yeah, I won't say any more, but I think it's pretty straightforward.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott, did you wish to say anything?
No, I reserve the right. Thank you.
Thanks, councillors. I'll put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. It's carried 7-0. Item 9.8, progress update on community asset committees and future governance model. Purposes of this report is to enable Council to determine the future governance models for Council's 21 community asset committees. Are there any questions for officers? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 3 of the recommendation is that Council increases funding in the next year's budget to improve our capacity to respond to the priorities of our community asset committees. Later on in the report, it sort of says there's no financial management implications. I'm just wondering what this is targeted at and how many dollars are we talking about?
CEO.
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor Costin. There is no implication in Council supporting the recommendation presented in the report because it doesn't actually commit Council to making a financial change in its upcoming budget, just merely flagging that it could consider an increase through that budget process. The primary aim of this report is to continue the work we are doing to be really clear about the Community Asset Management Committee arrangements, the governance of those committees, and helping those communities be really successful in their roles as committees. We have recognised through conversations that there is a lot of fantastic work being done by the community to look after these assets that are important to their local area, but council also has a role in that, and we're assessing whether we have enough investment available to us. That will be a matter through the council budget itself. Thanks.
Any other questions? Councillors, we have a recommendation with the report. Does the council wish to move a motion? Councillor Hunter, thank you. Councillor White, are you seconding? Thank you. Is to be opposed? Thanks, Councillor Runnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I support the motion because I think this forms a really important component of the partnership between the community and the council, that the council relies on its community for support, and especially with these assets which are community owned and used, if you like. And so it's critical that we have that community ownership and or feedback into the appropriate development and repair and maintenance. And it's absolutely critical in that context that the council supports those groups who provide that service to us. And this is what this is intended to do.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Yeah, look, I just want to recognise the work that Lenny Jenner has done and Janine engaging with the committees and presenting a special workshop session to council and a discussion paper to enable us to really get our heads around what we're looking at. I've visited many of these halls and committees and talked to people, and the volunteers are really passionate about what they do, and they're really committed to their local communities. Each one is different, and they really add to the vibrancy of our community. They give a lot of their own time, so I think it's really important that we recognise that and work with them. So I would also support considering funding in the budget for them and for better asset maintenance.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to acknowledge and express my thanks on behalf of, as a councillor, for the significant contribution of the volunteers who manage these various facilities throughout the municipality. Often these Shire halls are one of the most common facility, if you like, that are managed in these ways. I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of council officers to address the process of the management in relation to these committees. A lot of positive progress has been made in the last 18 months to 2 years on this issue, and I thank the council officers involved for that. And I'm supporting this resolution because we can and we should support these community asset committees and the volunteers with the work they do, and it would be a positive improvement if there was more funding available for maintenance of these facilities.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Any other councillor? Thanks, councillors. I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried 7-0. Councillors, I'm feeling like a 5-minute break. Anyone else want one? I might just call it, I think, 5 minutes.
You're on the show? My eyes got the jumps. You know when you get tired and your eye gets jumps? Very annoying.
Don't talk about that.
No, I'll notice it more. My eyes got the jump. Oh, God.
Thanks, everyone. We'll recommence. Item 9.9, councillor attendance at the Australian Local Government Association's 29th National General Assembly and Regional Forum in Canberra. The purpose of this report is to provide for Colac Otway Shire Council's participation in the Elgar Conference and Regional Cooperation Development Forum in Canberra during the period 13th to 16th of June 2023. Do we have any questions of officers? Councillor Finnegan.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in relation to the costs around sending councillors to Elgar, do we have a breakdown of sort of roughly what it has cost per councillor / officer representative in previous years? Do we have an estimate on that or anything of that ilk? Sorry, I'm just...
Yeah, counts through the Mayor. I think that figure is in the report. I'm just putting my hands on it. And it's informed by the experience of previous years. So it's reasonable.
Can I just quickly ask where that is? Sorry, I must have missed that in the brief.
Yeah.
Thank you. Shoot.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, so it's about
All right.
3,500.
Thank you.
per
Sorry,
councillor.
yeah, I completely missed that point. So that renders my question moot. Ignore me.
Thank you. Any other councillors with questions? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess I'm seeking some clarification. I thought that there was maybe some consideration to two councillors going, the Elgar rep and the deputy. Is that what we're planning to do? Oh, that's what it now says.
Yeah, that is correct. I was going...
Sorry. That's not what it says in the agenda. Yeah.
No, that's right. We've made a change. Councillors, we have a recommendation in relation to this. Does anyone wish to move a motion? Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Seconder, please. Councillor White. Thanks. Is it to be opposed? Okay. Thank you. Councillor Finnegan, did you wish to speak to it?
I thank our new Elgar representative and sub-rep for volunteering to spend roughly a week surrounded by public servants in Canberra.
Thank you. Councillor White, did you wish to speak?
Just very briefly to say that I attended a couple of years ago, and new councillor or a councillor in general, I would recommend the Elgar conference. Was really informative and a great opportunity to listen and hear ideas from other councils.
Thanks, Councillor White. Any other councillor? Thanks, Councillor Hanson.
I'll just make the comment also that it's possible to attend this conference online for any councillor that is interested in who the speakers are and what's happening.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. No other councillor? Councillors, I'll put it to vote. All those in favour? Thank you. It's carried 7-0. Item 9.10. Purpose of this report is to present an updated S6 instrument of delegation from Council to members of staff for each of the relevant acts and regulations as a result of the biannual update to legislation as advised by Maddox Legal Services. Do we have any questions of officers? No questions. Councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with a report for consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Sorry, did you waive, Councillor White? No, you didn't. Councillor White, you did, and seconded Councillor Arnott. Don't scratch your ear next time. Is it to be opposed? Councillor White, did you want to say anything?
Thanks for that, Mayor. No, this is a really important part of our duties and responsibilities to ensure that the instrument of delegations are properly acknowledged and used. So yes, I'm happy to move the motion.
Thank you, I knew that. Councillor Arnott, did you wish to say anything?
Just to support the motion, the instrument of delegation is an essential component for the operations of council, for the community to be aware of, that on a day-to-day basis, without this, the CEO and her other executive officers and the people that they empower to carry out the duties of council would not be able to operate. So therefore I support the motion.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Thanks, councillors. I'll put that to vote. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried 7-0. Item 9.11, Audit and Risk Committee meeting, unconfirmed minutes, 15th of February 2023. Purpose of this item is to provide for information the Colac Otway Shire Audit and Risk Committee unconfirmed minutes dated 15th of February 2023. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No questions. The officers have provided a recommendation with this report. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Could I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Councillor White. Is to be opposed? Councillor Hanson, did you wish to say anything?
Just that this is actually the first meeting that I attended, so yeah, I'm happy to confirm these minutes.
Thank you, Councillor White. Any other councillor? Thank you. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried 7-0. Councillors, can we note item 9.12, report on the informal meetings of councillors, and item 10.1, report from the Delegate Municipal Association Victoria State Council meeting held on Friday the 14th of October 2022. This is for noting the report, but Councillor Hart, did you wish to make a brief comment on this or not? Thank you. Do councillors have any questions of Councillor Hart? No, they don't. Thank you. Councillors, item 10.2, we have a notion of motion in relation to 69 McLaughlin Street sale options. Councillor Costin, it's your notice of motion. Did you wish to briefly describe the purpose of the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. The sale of this land, the history goes back a long way, back to 2016, and I think a lot's changed since then. It's appropriate we do a bit of a stock take and have a consolidated report on where we're at and where we're going with this. I have proposed a change to the notice of motion, adding in the blue words, that the report and recommendation also address the acquisition and disposal of land policy criteria for the disposal of land, just to make sure that we are on the right track here.
Thank you. I'll just give everyone a moment just to pick up on those few extra words. Councillors, are there any questions of officers at this point? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. My question through you is, if this resolution is not supported, won't there have to be some sort of report to council, because the approval to sell the property by auction mentioned an end date of the year 2022, and obviously that. So I'm not questioning the decision to sell it, but the method of selling, won't that have to come back to us in one way or the other?
So through the Mayor, Councillor Hart, you're correct that there will have to come back to council a report, because we are obliged to bring a discussion around value and reserve regardless, and so that will be when we affirm the way forward if this motion is not carried.
Any other questions? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for that answer. I understand from the previous resolution that had we sold it by auction, it had to come back for reserve. But my question through you, Mayor, is doesn't it have to come back now for the mechanism or way it is sold? Because point 2 of the resolution that authorised the sale only authorised public auction before the end of 2022. So won't it have to? So I'm suggesting and I'm asking, it's not just a matter of the reserve for the auction, but surely we have to have a report as to whether or not we even auction the property. Not that we sell it, but that auction be used as the method.
Unfortunately, my device with the agenda went flat, so I've swapped and not got my exact point up. Yeah, I don't have point 2 of the previous
So if it helps, I'm looking at the minutes of the 20th of April 2022, which I've got to just happen to have a copy of if you want to look at it.
Yeah, I don't. I don't. But it is absolutely the intention to come back, and if that means that if the previous resolution indicates that we need to also review the method of sale, then we will do that too. I don't have the wording of the minutes of that meeting.
Any other questions for officers? Councillor Costin, you wish to move your motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I've moved the motion, which is on the lower part of the screen, the revised notice of motion.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hart. Is it to be opposed? No one's opposing. Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. As I said before, this sale of this property, the proposed sale of this property, it's been going on a long time. It was first, Council first gave its in-principle support in August 2016. That was the last council term. That's almost 7 years ago, and a lot of things have changed since that time. Some of the things that have changed are the release of the G21 Key and Essential Worker Housing Action Plan, which recommended that Colac Otway Shire investigate constructing high-quality rental housing for health workers. And if you're familiar with this block, you'll know that it's directly opposite the Apollo Bay Hospital. The plan also recommended Council consider the creation of a community land trust and facilitate the development of seasonal worker housing, seeking investment for housing, possibly on council or community land trust owned land, perhaps on a 50-year lease arrangement. In June 2021, we updated our acquisition and disposal of council property policy, and the policy has an overarching requirement to manage council properties in a way that delivers the best value for our community. It requires council to consider the strategic, economic, social and environmental objectives when selling land in order to deliver the best financial and strategic social outcome for our community. And policy goes on to say that a sale should not inhibit or prevent the fulfilment of an identified strategic objective now or in the future, and that the property is not required for community use with a demonstrated demand now or in the future. I'm not sure that we've actually addressed the requirements of our policy in relation to the sale of this land as yet, in relation to the proposed sale of this land as yet. Also, since the first in principle decision was made, we've declared a key and essential workers housing crisis, and we noted the substantial shortage of key and essential worker housing along our coastline. We agreed there was a strategic need to act to reduce the shortage of affordable housing to underpin our economy. Around the same time, the Apollo Bay Affordable Housing Task Force was formed, And that task force has proposed some housing options that have yet to be fully explored by staff. In April 2022, we resolved to sell the property to Homes Victoria, and I think that's the last the community heard about the sale of this property. That sale is not proceeding, and we are still wondering what to do, it seems, at the moment. We asked Council to pause. In a briefing, we asked Council to pause pending looking at some other options. But that decision, that direction has not been transparent to the public. So this notice of motion is trying to provide that transparency. So quite a lot of change since 2016. I don't see that we've exhausted all possible options to use this property in a strategic way that will deliver the best economic and social outcome for the local community, both now and into the future, as is required by our updated sale of land policy. This motion just proposes we have a stock take, a more comprehensive look at our future strategic needs and all the possible affordable housing options. Because once we sell this land, the opportunity that's now before us will be lost forever. If we sell by public auction, we won't have the land to partner with any other level of state government, and federal government is looking to local government for affordable housing at the moment, and we know there are things in train there. We won't ever be in such a good position as we are now with this property to do something tangible, something solid to respond to our coastal community's urgent need for affordable housing. So I urge you to support this motion, and let's give effect to our declaration of an affordable housing crisis. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Costin. Right on time. Councillor Hart, do you wish to speak?
I'll reserve, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Thanks, Councillor Hanson.
Actually, I'll just say up front, I won't be supporting this motion. I just wanted to have a listen to what Councillor Costin had to say. I just want to make the point that there has been a really good outcome for the community for this property. A brand new kinder at Apollo Bay at the Peter 12 School on that site has been built, which is fantastic. So council's contribution was in the vicinity of around $400,000. So council, but conditional of that was the sale of this property to fund that. So we've kind of spent the proceeds. We've already sort of spent a lot of the proceeds of the sale of this property. And then the gap between, I guess, what we eventually sell it for and what we have to refund council for our contribution to the kinder depends on the sale price, of course, but in a subsequent council resolution, that money is to be set aside potentially to be spent on, I haven't got the exact words, maternal and child health. Yeah, that's right. So there's a lot of things happening with this property, and a lot of, like a really good outcome with the new kinder. The property was offered to Homes Victoria for use as social housing, but that offer was knocked back by Homes Victoria. And I think it has been like a long drawn out process, but I think we're now at the point where the property needs to be sold. I'm supporting the sale of the property, and for council to be reimbursed for its contribution for the kinder, and potentially, and also it happened at last council meeting, the council has decided to allocate a certain amount of money, over $100,000, to investigate the Nelson Street depot as potentially, some type of housing. So you can't argue that council isn't doing anything, but I will stress at the end of the day, council cannot solve all the world's problems, and there does come a point where we have to make a decision, and I will be supporting the sale of this property, reimbursing council for its contribution to the kinder, and you know, I think that's been a great outcome for this property.
Thanks, Councillor Hanson. Any other councillor? Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to support the comments by Councillor Hanson in respect to everything she said about that property. I'm new to this particular topic, but one of the things that has been brought to the discussion is the design and development overlay for the property, and I wondered if one of the officers might be prepared to give us some commentary about that, to the limitations or the difficulties of this particular block of land.
Look, we've moved into debate, Councillor Arnott. I think we perhaps should have canvassed that earlier. So
I'm happy to accept that as a ruling, and just to say that I won't be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Finnegan.
Thanks, Mayor, and I appreciate the input from Councillors Hanson and Councillor Arnott on this matter, and I also thank Councillor Costin for moving this notice of motion. As it stands, I won't be supporting this motion. I think that it's in, as my understanding of the previous history of this property is that there was an offer on the table. Council went back to the organisation and the revised offer we proposed was rejected. We've already spent the funds that were essentially earmarked for that project. I think it's important that we get the best value we can for it at this stage to recoup those monies, and hopefully anything extra be put aside for the benefit of the community. I think it's important that we undertake that process as soon as possible, and perhaps that we even explore going back to the initial organisation that was interested, and perhaps see if they're willing to play ball, as it were, and meet somewhere in the middle.
Thanks, Councillor Finnegan. Any other councillor? Councillor White.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm finding this a really challenging one to and feel a bit conflicted, because I'm very supportive of any housing innovation and opportunities to increase housing options for people. But I do feel that this has been going on for a very long time, and we have committed the funds to something that's already up and running, and my understanding with zoning issues and a lot of other issues, I don't think it's realistic that we're going to get a better outcome than what we've already explored. Housing Vic, at first were interested, then weren't interested. I don't see how a rooming house or such would work on this site, and I think we're just delaying the inevitable, and I would really be interested now in putting our focus into the Nelson Street possibilities, and I think that's going to create much more options and possibilities for different housing options in Apollo Bay. So I don't feel I can support this motion. I'll be looking forward to getting a further report from the CEO about the method of sale and the things that will go around that. But yes, I think we need to move on.
Thanks, Councillor White. Councillor Hart, you're reserved.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Since the decision to sell this property, there has been some progress in the sense that Homes Victoria have ruled themselves out of interest for the particular property. I don't think that there's any cash flow urgency in relation to having to sell this property off quickly. Council has more than $1 million from the sale of Bruce Street that's not earmarked for expenditure and is in the bank, and that more than covers any immediate cash flow need from having paid $380,000 towards the new Apollo Bay kindergarten. So there's no urgency to rush off and have a fire sale. What Council did do in April 2022 is authorise the property to be sold by the end of 2022 by auction. That date has now expired, so one way or another the matter will have to come back to Council for a decision. If you vote against this today, it's going to have to come back to us as a report anyway. If we vote for this, It would simply be identifying whether there's some priorities and whether maybe an expression of interest process, how that might happen. Either way, this has to come back, but by voting against this, I mean, it leaves management a little bit confused, because does that mean we don't want to look at expression of interest? I would have thought we have a responsibility of looking at the best sale method. Been a few interest rate rises since April 2022, as I'm sure most people will know, and I would question whether selling this property by auction now, in the current environment, is the best way for the sale. Quite apart from the sensible and important issues that Councillor Costin has raised as to whether there might be some opportunities around social or affordable housing. Have a look at how we progressed the sale of Bruce Street. It took a couple of goes, and it had some objectives around some social housing. CEO did an excellent job in having another look at that and working out how that would be handled. And that's the opportunity here. That's the opportunity, and an expression of interest process could look at all options. In one sense, no matter what you do here today, it's got to come back to us. And I don't, with all due respect, accept that it only has to come back to us to discuss a reserve. The auction is off the table. The auction, the authorisation to sell by auction expired at the end of 2022. It can be put back on the table, but that will require a council report. So I really can't see why people would be so opposed to putting these other issues on the table. Isn't it an expression of interest? Are there any opportunities around social or affordable housing as part of that sale? Because one way or the other, you're going to have to reconsider this. It can't be sold by the CEO under the current resolution, because that authorisation has expired. So I agree that we've decided to sell it, but we haven't given the CEO authorisation as to how to sell it.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor Costin, right to reply.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hart, for making clear what that last motion actually said in relation to the sale of the property. You're quite right, I've just looked at it, and it will require a report on the method of sale and the reserve to come back to council. We did, back in 2016, we did commit funds from the sale of this property, not to the kindergarten, it was to the maternal and child health component of the early years hub. But we haven't re-looked at that. We haven't looked at other ways that we can now finance that rather than through this property, and considering that was 7 years ago. And there's no, as Councillor Hart said, there's no imperative for us to sell. Owning land is like having money in the bank. If we sell the property, we'll pay for our component, we'll reduce our cash commitment to the maternal and child health centre, but the rest of the funds, which could be 400, 500,000, will just sit in the bank. Yeah, I'd rather have the land, because I expect the value of the land will increase, and eventually, perhaps through the federal government's initiative on affordable housing, we will have the opportunity to offer land for affordable housing, not for free, but in the longer term through a lease arrangement, so that there is funding coming back to council, which would justify our offering of the land. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Let's look at what we can do with the land. We paused the sale so that officers would have a look. I thought that wasn't a very in-depth look, and I'd like to see other options explored. The Local Housing Task Force has proposed some options. Planning rules do restrict what can be done there, but the private sector or someone else can look at applying for a planning permit change. But even so, under the current regulations, a rooming house of up to 8 rooms could be built on that site. All it needs is an investor, whether it's government, private sector, community land trust or other coming in to do that, to partner with council on that. And there is a community land trust.
Running out of time, Councillor
Okay.
Costa.
And there is
Well,
a
you've run
community-
over time, but keep going for a little bit more.
And there is a community land trust in Apollo Bay. It runs the Lionsville Housing Centre for low-income people and crisis accommodation. I don't know if we've even talked to that group as yet, but that's what I'd like to see happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Motion is defeated 2-5. Division's called by Councillor Hart. Thank you. All those in favour? Councillor Costa and Councillor Hart. All those against? Councillor White, Councillor Arnott, Councillor Finnegan, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Potter. Thanks, councillors. Councillors, item 10.3, notice of motion, Skeens Creek to Wild Dog Creek Park. Councillor Hart, this is your notice of motion. Did you like to just introduce it for us?
Thanks, Mayor. The short version is to put on the table that as a council we should still be advocating for some sort of pathway to be constructed and perhaps express a little bit of concern about how the other funding was reallocated with not a lot of consultation with council.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of officers in relation to this? Back to you, Councillor Hart. You're going to move this motion?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Finnegan is to be opposed. Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. The Skeens Creek to Wild Dog Creek path was intended to provide a safe off-road trail from Skeens Creek through to Apollo Bay. I note that much of the information contained in the supporting statement that I've put in the agenda is derived from the report Apollo Bay to Skeens Creek Coastal Discovery Trail, and that's been provided to councillors on their iPad, and it's also available to the public on council's website. The path would be a benefit for residents and visitors alike. It's expected to contribute to increased visitation, increased length of visits, increased employment, first from construction and then indirectly through the tourism expenditure. It'd be attraction along the scenic coastline. I do want to acknowledge, of course, coastal erosion, climate change and sea level rise make the location of the path challenging in some areas, but there was a lack of consultation when the government decided to cut funding from the city deal allocation for the path. If adopted, this resolution will reiterate council's support for the path, and of course, if and when a path is constructed, there'll have to be due regard for the issues of coastal erosion and the effects of climate change to the area, as is the case for any infrastructure along the coast. So the precise layout of the path needs to reflect those limitations. So as I said, the purpose of this resolution is simply to express our ongoing support for some sort of path to be constructed.
Thanks, Councillor Hart. Councillor Finnegan.
Well, I think Councillor Hart's put it pretty well, but other than just to say, it's disappointing that what happened in relation to the previous funding arrangement for the path. Very disappointing, shall we say. And I think it's very important that we as a council put forth our view that this is something that should be built. It is a need of the community. It's something that contributes to the safety and the overall well-being of our coastal community. So yeah, that's why I'm supporting this.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Costin.
Thanks, Mayor. I happen to drive along this section of road quite often, 2, sometimes 3 times a day. And what I've noticed over time is an increasing number of out-of-town cyclists and walkers along the edge of the Great Ocean Road. And sometimes a group of walkers, a family group, which might have young kids. I've even seen someone pushing a pram or a pusher along there, often have dogs on leads. It's incredibly dangerous, and as I said, they're usually visitors because no one who's local ventures along that part of the road. And not only is there an increasing number of pedestrians and cyclists using the road, over the years there has been an increasing number of large vehicles, particularly large passenger buses. And if you're on the side of the road, when one of those buses goes past, you can feel a suction sucking you in to their path. So it's quite a major road safety issue that I see in my travels up and down that road. And I think it's preventing active transport. It's preventing kids riding their bikes to school at the moment, and it's preventing an opportunity for families to walk and enjoy the coast while walking on their feet rather than from the seat of a car, which is the only safe way to do that at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Costin. Any other councillor? Councillor Hanson.
I'll be supporting this motion. I want to start off by just thanking the community who for many, many years worked to try and get a project up for a safe walking path from Skeens Creek to Apollo Bay, and I think they really thought they had been rewarded for all their hard work over many, many years when the City Deal's funding was announced. And I also want to thank the staff at the Colac Otway Shire who have also put in an enormous amount of work into that trail over many, many years. Like an enormous amount of work went into it, an enormous amount of officer time. So I think I guess, we might have to accept the decision that has been made, but I think on behalf of the community, we really need to express our disappointment in the withdrawal of that funding. I think it's the right thing for us to do, and I think now we have to advocate for safer pedestrian access around there, because I certainly know when you drive into Apollo Bay from Skeens Creek, it's it's not particularly safe, and it's very popular with holiday makers. The campsite's just been renovated, and the Skeens Creek campsite, which is great, but people want to go for walks and they want to be connected, with the town. And we need to now pick up the pieces and start advocating again. And this is just the start of it.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Look, it's not customary for the chair to really weigh into these things, but I just do want to echo what's been said, and Councillor Hanson's right. I think we may have to accept what's happened with the trail as it was proposed, but the road safety is critical, especially crossing Wild Dog Creek Bridge. It really needs to be looked at, so I just wanted to throw my 2 bobs worth in. Councillors, if you're happy, I'll put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried 7-0. Councillors, thanks for your work this afternoon and evening. Thank you, officers. That concludes today's meeting.